Oh, bonjour, 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 noir. Gom. Nas, no, dus na kas. Ik heb doyan nomak. Er zo heb ik nou dat is schmoen. Snugget nan godgen. Wat is schmoen? Snugget nan godgen. Ik ken das yek. I wanted to talk to whomever today about the language and what one has to do to learn this language and to keep after it. A lot of people say they want to learn this language. I hear people talking about learning this language. I want to buy a book. I want to buy a dictionary. Do you have any dictionaries for sale? I want to buy some language books. Something that's easy to understand. You can do all that. All that is within means. There are dictionaries. I believe Forest County Potawatomi has one. I believe that Citizen Potawatomi has several online. We've got several online. And we are currently working on a lexicon it's going to have a considerable number of words on it. There's much work to be done, however, because we have to make sure that we are not repeating words and things of that nature. So it involves a lot of careful proofreading. But we are faithfully working on it all the time. But my original statement was it gets hard. It's hard learning this language. It's hard to pin yourself down, so to speak, and come to the point where you're going to learn the language, and you set time aside and you grit your teeth, so to speak, and make up your mind you're going to set a time every single day when you're going to practice speaking the language, saying the words that are sometimes difficult for you, listening to different recordings that are on many sites. I know that we have them. I am quite sure that the Forest County Potawatomi has Jim Thunder recorded on some things, and Justin Neely has some stuff recorded on the Citizen Potawatomi site. I am not aware of anyone else that has recorded Potawatomi specifically, but there are a lot of helps out there. And one can learn this language if one makes up their mind. But it's not something that you're going to learn overnight. It's not something that you're going to participate in 6 months, or even a year, or 2 years, or 3 years. And suddenly you're going to be talking with every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's traditional. Potawatomi, of course. But that's not the reality. Often that's a fantasy that people have in their heads. The reality is it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of what I would call, and I don't even know how to say this in Potawatomi, stick-to-itiveness. The ability to stick to something, regardless of how long and how difficult it can be. Let me tell you about my wife, Dolores. I am supremely proud of this lady. When I met her in May, I think, of 2002, which is many years ago now, she did not know any Potawatomi at all. Couldn't even say bonjour correctly. Couldn't say correctly. Everything that came out of her mouth was wrong. But she wanted to learn Potawatomi for the sake of our kids, for the sake of Whisper, Gabriella, and now our granddaughter, Anna, and my daughter Ruthie, and my son Don, and my daughter Cheryl, son Nick, sons Wally and Lee, Sarah, Christine, Nicholas, and others of their children. And I thought that this was a very noble idea at first, because I was of the opinion that anyone that couldn't even say bonjour or correctly would never be able to master Potawatomi. But you know, that little woman showed me something. She showed me her stick-to-itiveness. At that time, my mother was alive, and I introduced her to my mother, and I told her, I encouraged her, call my mother. Call her every day, because we can use this as an excuse to call my mother every single day. And we had the type of telephone that you don't pay for long-distance calls. Spectrum phone service does not charge for long-distance calls, so we could well afford to call my mother every day. So that is what she did. She called my mother every single day, and they talked Potawatomi. Well, Dolores tried to talk some Potawatomi, but it was because of those telephone calls and my mother and I constantly correcting her attempts to speak Potawatomi, where she was able, after 10 years, able to start helping me teach, and lost the accent that a lot of people have who start to speak Potawatomi. They'll say Potawatomi, and they'll say Potawatomi Mun, and they have a strange accent, people who are just learning. And my wife lost that accent, and she started to sound more like a fluent speaker. Not all at once, but over the years, she kept after it. Here we find ourselves in October 4th, I think it is, 2021, and she's well able to hold a conversation with most anybody and understand what people are saying and answer them and talk right along with them. That's what makes me proud of her. But I want to say this, though. I used to go to bed at night listening to her when we lived in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, and her clumsy attempts at Potawatomi. But she never let that bother her. She would just keep on reading and keep on pronouncing, keep on recording herself, and keep on speaking the language. No matter how many mistakes she made, she always came back. Am I pronouncing this right? Does this sound right? And either my mother or I would tell her how to say it. And sometimes we'd say the same word over and over to her 3 or 4 times until she got the right, correct pronunciation. And little by little, she began to catch the rhythm, the flow, the intonations, the inflections of the language. Now, she started, I said, in 2002. She's been at it for 19 years. And if you don't have that kind of stick-to-itiveness, that kind of commitment to stick to something for that long, you're not going to learn this language, not the way she has. She can teach things of this language that would amaze most people, that would amaze some linguists. She's able to understand linguistic features of this language and often explain it to me, because my strong point is not linguistics. I'm not a linguist. My strong point is just being able to say things the correct way in Potawatomi. But when I need to know something about some linguistic term as it applies to our language, she explains it carefully to me, and I begin to understand. And now I'm beginning to read a lot of linguistic papers that a lot of people have written, Rhodes, and especially the linguist who specialized in Potawatomi, Laura Welcher. I begin to understand a lot of stuff now that these other people have written. Bloomfield and the Menominee, and I'm beginning to understand a lot of things in other languages because my wife has encouraged me to keep looking at these things. All of this within 19, and we're approaching 20 years together as man and wife. And she's been learning our language, my language. I say our language because it's become our language now. It's no longer my language, it's our language. And that's basically what you have to do if you want to learn this language. You have to really buckle down and start to speak it. When someone corrects you and says you're not saying that right, don't take it personally. Adults are the hardest people to teach because they think they know something. Children that are younger, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, are so much easier to teach. I worked in a school in Wilson, Michigan at the Hannibal Indian School for quite some time. And I was taught from K through 12. But the students that I enjoyed working with the most were the ones from 3rd grade to about 7th. 3rd through the 7th grade, because these people did not have things in their head. You could tell them they were wrong and you tell them the right way to say it and they would say it. And some people are not like that. Adults are hard to teach because you have to always correct them and you try to say it and they think that they know what they're saying and they won't, a lot of them get embarrassed and won't try. I didn't see that about Dolores. I saw a woman who decided that she was going to speak this language, not just to learn it for her children, but for herself. It changed after a while. She took it upon herself to learn the language for herself. And in so doing, she did learn it for all of us, for the children and myself, and other Potawatomis that she might meet that speak the language. But the most important thing is, it's taught her that she can teach others. And believe me, she teaches a lot of people. On my site, naosna.org. We teach Zoom classes. We've been doing this now for 12, 15 years. When she first started trying to speak, I actually put her to work using her, and she would sit in the background and she would learn well and try to pronounce. And now she pretty much just takes it and teaches without me even being in the background. If I'm in the same room or close by listening and I hear some subtle mistake, I wait till after it's done and I correct her and she doesn't ever make the mistake again. That is what has been produced by her commitment. And I believe that if she can do it, anyone can do it, because she came with her baccalaureate and 2 years in her master's degree. So she's had quite a bit of education. She spoke some French, and believe me, she had a reason to probably think to herself, I know about language, I know how to say this, I can get this. But she displayed a very humble attitude through the whole thing. My mother made that remark one time. Meanwhile, she said, it's just now. She's very apt to just keep on, and she's humble. That's what she said about my wife. My mother has been gone since 2013 of September now. If she could hear my wife teach now, I'm sure my mom would be very proud of her, because she spent quite a few years getting phone calls from Dolores and calling Dolores at times just so they could talk. And one time I answered the phone, "Ni pigeon schnabbe quest." "Oh, the Quayomna. Ah, where's that Indian woman?" she said. "You mean my wife?" "Yes," she said. So after a while, she didn't think of her anymore as a non-Indian. She thought of her as a Potawatomi. That was her partner. That was the one she could talk to in Potawatomi. And they spent a lot of time together, talking, visiting. And toward the end of my mother's life, we brought her here where we live in Waupun, Wisconsin. We have another house right next door. And that's where my mother spent the last days of her life. But every single day, Dolores would be over there talking to her mother-in-law. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law would sit there and talk Potawatomi together. And my mother, when I would go over to visit with her and spend some time with her, she'd always tell me how much she appreciated being able to speak Potawatomi with someone, myself and my wife. She said we were the only two that could speak Potawatomi with her. And I'm so glad that I kept that up and kept encouraging her, because at first like I said, admittedly, I thought to myself initially, "You're going to learn Potawatomi." I didn't voice it, but I thought it. I don't think so. It's a pretty difficult language. I just don't think you're going to make it. But she's proven to me that she has learned enough of the language to know how to speak to people. Is she fluent? By no means. Even myself, I'm not completely fluent. A lot of heritage fluent speakers are no longer completely fluent. Let me explain. Because there are words that we no longer use any longer. I sit here day after day after day, jotting things down, writing things down, words that I remember, that I sit here and think, we don't even use that word anymore. We don't even use that word. So how in the world can I call myself a fluent speaker when I don't even use some of the words that my elders used 50 and 60 and 80 years ago? I recall, I'm 82 years old, I recall when I heard these words. That's why I'm able to write them down. And I'm sure my friend and cousin Jim Thunder and his sister probably run into the same thing, where they remember that they no longer use words anymore that they used to use years ago. So none of us, I don't think any of us can say that we're completely fluent, because to be completely fluent meaning you know every single word that we used to use. Somebody shared this little statistic with me one time, that in the present day and age, most English-speaking people that are Americans have a grasp of at least 3,000 words that they use effectively every day. Anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 words, some less and some a little more. But there's an average, about 2,500 to 3,000 words. And back when I was a child, the speakers of that day had a grasp of probably upwards of 15,000 to 20,000 words that they used effectively every single day. Those people were speakers. Those were heritage fluent speakers. I'm a heritage fluent speaker by definition, but I am not a completely fluent speaker simply because I have forgotten a lot of those words. I don't use a lot of those words anymore. It's not that I've forgotten them. I don't have anybody to use them with. I'm not able to talk with people who use them every single day. I have identified them, and we are creating a lexicon where I am posting a lot of those old words that we used to hear and that we used to use up on the bluff on Skunk Hill where I grew up. I remember a lot of things that my mother and my dad said, and my grandpa and my grandma. And some of those old people that lived up there when I was growing up as a child. There were Menominees that came through. There were Winnebagos that lived there with us. There were a lot of Ojibways that intermarried with us, that lived there with us. And some of them would come and go up to Lac de Flambeau and up to the Coudray and other places where they came from. Many times we would have visiting medicine men and visiting holy men that would come by and run ceremonies and doctor people. And these were the common things to do back in those days. I understood them then as a kid. I still understand Ojibwe people when they speak. I can't speak it as fast as they do, but I can surely speak some Ojibwe, some Odawa, and much of the Menominee language. But I'm not fluent in it any longer like I used to be, and I don't think I was ever really fluent. I think I was conversational, but I was completely fluent in Potawatomi when I was younger. I wanted to just say those few things so that people understand this about language, because you have to keep after it. You have to keep after it. Even me at my age, I have to keep after it. I spend a lot of time recording things and recording stuff that I've written. I'll look at it in English and translate it in Potawatomi, and to give myself practice in using my language. My language has become my favorite thing of the day. If it weren't for my language, I would not have the sharp mind that I have today. I know other people that are 82 years old that don't look like I do. Everybody who meets me says, "You don't look like you're 82. Well, I sure feel like it, I'll tell them. I may not look like it, but I sure feel like it. But you know, God blesses us with the way we are, by the way we live. I've never been a heavy drinker. I never been a heavy smoker. I haven't smoked since 1997. And I gave up drinking, even casual drinking that I did when I was in the Navy. I gave that up a long, long time ago. And I believe that's one of the reasons why I've been preserved by the Creator, our Creator, the Lord God. I've been preserved to be able to move around and walk around and talk with my family and teach as long as I have. And I still travel and doctor people and still do things that are absolutely necessary, as long as I don't overdo it. I mean, I'm not going to start off on a 1,000-mile trip, of course, no. But I will drive 250 miles to go see someone and doctor them or share with them something. But I wanted to leave these things with you all and just kind of encourage you all, those of you that are trying to learn your language, take your time. Take your time and stick to it. Commit yourself to it. Because if you do it for yourself, you're going to be able to do it. And you're going to be able to satisfactorily listen to yourself someday. And listen to others tell you, you sound pretty good. You sound almost fluent. You sound close to it. And those are wonderful words to hear, I know. My wife tells me that when my mother and I told her that. We satisfied her to see the smile on her face when we told her, "You're saying it right now, you're really saying it right." And that's wonderful to be able to give that kind of encouragement to people. If you choose to join us, my wife and I, we teach on Zoom. We have a website, www.patreon.com/Naosno. And I have a blog, Naosno, at wordpress.com. And we're always posting language in there. We're always saying something about language and saying something about our culture as well. So I want to encourage all of you, like I said. This is my encouragement to all of you to not ever give up. If you're in the business of learning this language, don't give up. Cut yourself some slack. Be kind to yourself and just say, "I'm doing good. I'm going to learn this language. It may take me a few years to perfect it, my pronunciation and everything, but I'm going to learn it." And be humble. When someone corrects you, be humble. And thank them because they're trying to help you out. So that's what I'd like to leave with you today. Aha. Jej nasz bojan, nas non dysnakas. Aha. Pama pimina.